That's which position.
Monkeyboy's YouTube channel stands independently and intersubjectively, the best YouTube channel in the cosmos. You should subscribe to his YouTube channel and Patreon. I'm talking from the depths of my heart.
The way that this is set up is pretty simple. Y'all are going to have 8-minute introductions. So you'll have 8 minutes at the start of the debate to, let me fix this, 8 minutes at the start of the debate to make your introductory statements. And then we'll move into an hour open panel or open discussion between the two of y'all. The audience can jump in with super chats. We had time when the audience says a super chat time that would be taken at addressing the super chat. So they can ask a question for $5 or $2 puts it on the screen. You guys don't have to address anything that gets put on the screen, but I will do the interrupts with the larger super chats and get a question there. The time gets added to the timer, so it could be up to an additional hour there. Y'all can concede at any point. So if either of y'all feel like you're not making a good case, you realize you're wrong, something like that, you can concede the debate, and then we'll just move straight into the open panel. Y'all don't have to stick around for the open panel, but if you'd like to, you're welcome to stick around and chat with the audience afterwards. It's pretty simple here. There's not a ton of rules during the mega bloodbath portion, the open discussion portion. So with that, just try to be somewhat respectful and realize that y'all are sharing the time together. So try to give each other a fair amount of time to make points and address questions. If you declare yourself the winner, that is a loss. So don't go and declare yourself the winner. Now, you do want to tie whatever things you discuss back into the topic. So the topic is there good evidence for the Christian God? So if you're making a point, it seems to go off on a tangent, just pull it back into the topic. It's not an actual like disqualification or anything if you go off topic, but the audience is going to hold that against you in the actual vote portion. Any questions, or is this all pretty clear for the two of y'all?
Yeah, who goes first, or how does that work?
Yeah, so Maarten, you are taking the affirmative, so you'll go first in the introduction, and then monkeyboy will go second in the introduction, and then once again, you'll go first in the closing, and then monkeyboy will close out the debate as he's taking the negative there. Any other questions?
No. Monkeyboy, do you have something? Nothing.
Cool. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to hide myself here and put Maarten full screen. Maarten, whenever you're ready, let me know. And I do see the super chats. We'll get to that. Any super chats that come in during the introductions, we'll get to those as soon as we get into the open discussion portion. So Maarten, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your 8-minute time. 8 minutes.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Tacos, and thanks, Monkeyboy, for chatting with me. Hopefully, it's going to be interesting. I think it will. I wanted to debate. Is there evidence for God? Okay. Then he responded with, "Is there good evidence for the Christian God?" I think that I kind of look up to people that change the topic from "is there good" not "is there evidence for God" or to "is there good evidence for God?" Because like if a person knows this, like a flat earther will never debate is there evidence for round earth, because there's obviously evidence for round earth. They will always say, is there good evidence for that's much more subjective, you know? So then they can easily deny that there's good evidence for around earth. So that I see that a lot, where no well-known atheist will debate, is there evidence for God? Because obviously there is, according to the definition there is. But tonight, so we're going to talk about, is there good evidence for the Christian God? And I think there's lots of good evidence for the Christian God. I think there's lots of evidence for Christian God. Hopefully Monkeyboy can agree with me there. I think the best evidence for the Christian God is cumulative evidence. So there's multiple pieces of evidence that point to the Christian God existing. Just like in a court case, you have multiple pieces of evidence that point to someone being guilty. It's not just one piece of evidence that usually does the job. It's multiple pieces of evidence that just does the job. The same with the flat earther. If you want to prove to that guy that the earth is round, it takes multiple evidences to make him realize that the earth is actually round. I have evidence, say you go to a flat earther and you tell him many people come back from space and they testify that the earth is round. Many people. Now, I would love to ask Monkeyboy if he accepts that as evidence. Because if he accepts that as evidence for the earth being round, like if he says that is a good argument for flat earthers, then he's kind of saying like it could be as well for the God hypothesis, because, or the Christian God hypothesis, because there's many people that come in contact with God throughout history, still today. I have many examples of that with the Christian God in particular. I have many examples where Muslims, or even Paul, he was killing Christians, hating Christians, and then he one day comes in contact with God and he realized he was deceived his whole life, his whole time, by killing Christians and stuff. The same happens to Muslims. They come in contact with God and then they realize they were deceived their whole life into hating Christians, killing Christians, stuff like that. And this is just some of the evidence for God, for the Christian God. There's other evidence as well. Indirect evidence more is like, how Some people told me, people tell you when you're young, all this tooth miles and, you know, Father Christmas, he exists, and I was doing tests on all these things and they all failed the test. Like I would steal my sister's tooth to do tests on the tooth mouse, and he failed the test. He didn't take the tooth. So I started figuring out this stuff. But when I do tests on God and demons, they pass the test. So they've passed many tests, indirect tests, direct tests. So this, and I would love people to explain away the evidence for demons, but demons also point is indirect evidence for the Christian God. Like you can figure out who the Christian God is just by looking at demons and who they react to and who they target. Like from my research, demons do things in threes because they hate the triune God. Um, but God also does stuff in threes. It's like America has an American flag, okay? But Iran also uses the American flag, but they burn it. In the same way, demons scratch people in threes. They wake people up at 3 a.m. Has personally happened to me, and my father and my brother at the same time after watching Emily Rose. And I've did testing on other people with this Emily Rose, and some of them didn't even finish the movie. Some of them didn't even start the test before they woke up at 3 a.m. And then they said they're not going to do this test even they before I did the test. And then there are there's one person that contacted me late at night, and he said like at 3 a.m. a vase fell next to his clock and the light went on. Yeah, this is all evidence pointing to the Christian God, because demons react to his name. I've even a Satanist. He was at 3 a.m. He said things started choking him, and that's one of the characteristics of demons. They seem to love choking people, and this thing was choking him, and he called out for Jesus for help, and the whole experience stops. I have a Muslim as well saying that the whole experience stopped. He didn't become a Christian after that, but that was the beginning of his confusing. He called it. The Satanist didn't become a Christian at all. He thought that the demon is Jesus. That's why he stopped. He came to the wrong conclusion, in my opinion. There's much more evidence that that the demon actually fled from calling to Jesus. I have evidence where there's a witch. She doesn't really believe so much in Jesus, but she started becoming more Christian-like, and she did a exorcism of a room, and she called out and said like, in the name of Jesus, like leave the room. And there's like audio recording of you just hearing this scream, this unhuman-like scream of this thing fleeing. I could show you that evidence. I can show you how demons react to God's name, the Christian God's name. I think that's evidence that the Christian God is the true God. We would expect demons to be scared of the Christian God. So I think Satanists even realize that the Christian God is the true God. I've seen some of them complain that the Christian God gets in the way of the stuff that they do. They don't complain about Allah. I've never seen a Satanist complain that Allah gets in the way of the stuff they do. But I've seen Satanists that talk and see demons and work with them full time and tell other people to also work with them, and that they're so useful and all kinds of crap like that. You don't see that.
30 seconds left.
Yes, thank you for updating me. So I'm looking forward to hearing what monkeyboy has to say, and I would love for him to explain all the evidence I have for demons, and that points to the Christian God. But I would love demons to be weak as well. So if you can do that while showing me where I'm wrong, I would love that. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. Hopefully, it's going to be fruitful. And may God bless all of you in the discussion. Thanks.
All right. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. That was perfectly timed. Let me shrink this. Monkey Boy, let me know when you're ready and I'll start your timer.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Perfect. You've got 8 minutes starting now.
Yeah, so we're debating whether there's good evidence for God. Obviously I don't think there is. And by good evidence, it's talking about the impact of credence the evidence should be doing. So it's a question about the epistemic force. So obviously evidence here is just what's expected on a hypothesis if true. So good evidence here is taken to be something at least along the lines of raising the credence of the proposition to 50 or higher, such that one is epistemically warranted in thinking that God exists. So my priors in theism are incredibly low for like a range of reasons, but I guess I could get into that in a moment. He kind of talked about how evidence is kind of obvious, that things obviously, like theism obviously has evidence. And I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think it is true that evidence comes cheap, such that you can basically get very, you can easily find evidence for any proposition, such that it motivates the proposition. But I don't think it's the case that you can easily find. There's obviously evidence for Christian theism. Christian theism is kind of fuzzy. There's not a very precise account of Christian theism. For example, Christians might endorse the view that God is omnipotent and omnibenevolent, along with the view that they take this axiological view that goods and evils are opposed. I think if you endorse an archetype of theism of the such, you're sensitive to the force of the logical problem of evil, meaning that theism would be impossible, at least that archetype of theism. And if the probability of the proposition is 0, just as if the probability of any proposition was 1, once those hit those thresh marks, those aren't actually sensitive to being changed. I think there could be dispute around the LPOA and whether or not one's mistaken for thinking a contradiction entails. But from that derivation alone, if that's established, then that's enough to say that there's not evidence in favor of that. Though you might think that there's certain things that are expected even then on Christian theism, but you actually wouldn't be able to change the distribution there. But I don't need to get into all of that. So he talked about he's doing like an accumulative case for theism. Not single evidences are strong enough to justify theism or justify the belief that God exists, Christian God exists. And that's fine. The route he's going, though, for demons, of course, I take several issue with those. But, of course, concerning stuff about my priors, and we could get into, like, concerns of explanatory engineering and reasoning abductively, right? Inference of the best explanation. I think that we have a load of candidate alternative explanations. So basically, we might need to just run into a stalking horse objection for any one of the evidences. Like the stuff he talked about of people claiming they've came in contact with God or demons. Either of those we can talk about. I don't think either of those are really good pieces of evidence in favor of theism. But there might be a concern whether theism is intelligible whatsoever. I want to, at least for the sake of the conversation, try and avoid an unintelligibility critique. I don't actually think theism is intelligible. That's why I said I'm technically not an atheist. But I think there's at least good enough reasons for me to think that theism, if I share the concept you have, is likely to be false. So I would at least try avoiding, but you never know how the dialectic goes. It might be the case that the flow of the dialectic is one where unintelligibility is inevitable, and we might just reach a deadlock in some of the underpinning metaphysics concerning theism and why I don't think theism's a meaningful thesis. But that aside, I find it that there's going to be good reasons in favor of thinking the proposition God doesn't exist, and I guess I'm interested to hear the reasons he has to think God does exist. And with that, that's all I have.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction. And just to clarify for the title and the description, so you're an atheist then? Or a theological non-cognitivist?
Yeah, I'm a agnostic, but you could just say I'm an atheist.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Okay, so we are going to be moving into the open discussion portion here. Once again, keep in mind, you guys share the time. I get it if you get heated, yell at each other a little bit, whatever. But let's not try to straight up demean each other and constantly overtalk each other. Let's try to have a productive conversation, avoid the low blows. We'll go ahead and get started with this here in just a second. I'm resetting the timer here real fast. But we did have a super chat to start it off with, and then we'll go ahead and move into the open discussion portion. So I'm going to read the super chat and then I'll start the timer. So Shadow Slays says, the Bible will always be in the fiction section at the bookstores. Remember that. I'm starting the timer now. You can address that if you want, Maarten, and then we'll move into and then you guys just start having your discussion. Bloodbath engage!
Yeah, I don't think the Bible is fiction. And thank you, monkeyboy, for what you said. Like, I'm glad that you seem to know that there is evidence for God, but you would just call it probably bad evidence or what, right? You would say it's not enough to get you to 50%. You said you need to get to 50% certainty. I think Cosmic Skeptic, I don't know if you know him, but he said there's lots of wonderful evidence for God. It's just not enough to get him past the 50%. But he freely admits there's lots of wonderful evidence for God, and I'm glad you at least admit there's evidence for God, because it seems like there's a lot of atheists that think there's nothing. They are either ignorant or perhaps deceived or something, and they think there's nothing. So I'm glad you at least agree that there is evidence. I would love to show you that there's actually good evidence for God. But in a court case, there's lots of pieces of evidence that points to a person being guilty. Obviously, the opposing side is going to make excuses for each piece of evidence. But the the amount of things pointing towards the person being guilty, you would need to have excuse for each piece of evidence. So either the person is just one of the most unluckiest people in the world, or someone planted all that evidence. There's always that escape. So you don't prove beyond a possible doubt. You have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, because otherwise no one would be thrown in jail. Because there's always a possibility that some evidence had some explanation. If you understand what I mean, Monkey Boy. Hopefully you're following.
Yeah.
Is there something that I said wrong or something?
Well, I do want to clarify. It's not necessarily the case that to have good evidence, meaning evidence such that you're warranted in believing that it's necessarily 50%. Like, you can imagine that you have you're doing like an explanatory argument where you want to say that there's some datum, and the best explanation available for the datum is this. You might think that there's a possibility space of alternatives, and when you consider the most probable, or even more, the most plausible candidate options, suppose like we have 4 candidate options, right? It might be the case the distribution amongst the 4 is ones where one is favored, but is not necessarily 50%, right? You might think that one is 35, the other is 25, and then like 30 and 10, and those are the 4 most plausible. And that one that you might think wins is on the basis of 35. There's also some other kind of epistemic clarity we might need to add. There's people who are not per se Bayesian in their understanding of explanatory virtues. So they might consider explanatory virtues to be heuristics or things that help between deciding between competing explanations, where those don't actually factor into probability. So I'm not being very rigorous in what I'm saying is warrant, right? Because it's not necessarily per se a 50%. But I don't think, like I said, that there's good evidence. I would even say less than what O'Connor is saying. I don't think there's like amazing evidence. I don't really think there's very, very impactful evidence in influencing my credence, to be fair. So,
what's the best evidence you've seen, like, that you think is the best? If you look at all the evidence for God, what do you put at the top?
Like in philosophy of religion today, in contemporary philosophy of religion, there's like 2 arguments. There's like the psychophysical harmony and fine tuning. You probably see like what's his name, Wolin and Edelstein, Luke Barnes, several others defend these arguments. These are like New Age Bayesian arguments. At least they're typically ran in Bayesian formulations, and these are like the most compelling arguments today. I think they face a number of issues, so I don't think they're as powerful as people think. I might even say some of these arguments are impotent, but I do think that they scale a whole lot better than like cosmological arguments, ontological arguments. Of course, moral arguments I think are complete trash. Precept arguments are complete trash. So, yeah, I mean, if you just make like
what do you think about that argument I used? We go to flat earthers, you and me, and we tell them we have lots of testimonies of guys coming back from space, and they testify that the Earth is round.
Yeah,
would that count as evidence for the Earth being round?
Yeah, that would be.
So that's eyewitness testimony evidence, right?
Yeah, the report.
Would it count as good evidence?
No.
Okay, so it's not good evidence. Why is it bad evidence? So if a flat earther say that's just bad evidence, I give him multiple videos of people testifying to coming back, and they see it's round.
Yeah, I have my suspicions it's not good evidence, but you might be reserved in judgments to whether they're bad. You can be indifferent to whether it's good and bad, but still have reason nonetheless to say, you don't think it's good, but you're not in a standing to say it's bad. The reason I wouldn't think that alone is good enough evidence is because that's expected on.
I didn't say that alone. I'm just saying it's good evidence. I'm not saying that alone proves something.
I'm saying that if we're just considering this datum to be evidence, that this alone is not good, and it's not good for the reasons that
it's not good enough, but it could be good evidence. It's not good enough to bring you over 50 because you need more evidence, right? For the flat earther, obviously, he's going to say he wants more evidence.
Yeah, I'm saying I don't think it's
then just people coming.
The reasons that it seems like there's a large net of alternative explanations that expect this. So it's not really clear to me why I would think that that's any good of an evidence.
So you wouldn't trust the astronauts to come back and testify that the Earth is round. You wouldn't see that testimony. What if they put their lives on the line when testifying? I think, like, say there was a community that killed them if they testified. So let's say flat earthers started killing people that testify that the Earth is round. And so these guys now come up and they testify in front of everyone, putting their lives on the line. Would that make the evidence stronger put their lives on the line for that testimony?
No, that wouldn't, because that only tells you about how confident they are in believing it. I mean, maybe it would to a degree if you had your suspicions that they might be lying. You might think that it's less expected on the hypothesis it's a lie that, they do that, supposing there isn't strong gain from the lie such that they have countervailing reason to even lie, updating on the fact that their life's in jeopardy. But generally, I wouldn't see that as very good, because people's faculties of perceptions are not reliable enough to say, if I go up from the moon and I see that shape, I mean, you might see it as a shape, but maybe you're just looking at it as a flat, circular shape, and you're just seeing the flat end.
Yeah, but someone was going around, say, in a space station, going around seeing the whole Earth.
Yeah, I mean, if we had like good reasons to think in the background that the astronauts circled the whole planet or significant portion of the planet to which they would see like the bottom if it were flat, and like many of them were declaring that they've seen it that way, and they even were willing to put their life in jeopardy in testing to that, then that should be a good motivation to think that they're saying the truth.
But because scientists take people testifying to stuff seriously, like in social sciences, they have questionnaires and stuff. And even with the UFO phenomena, scientists that study that, they say that they thought that the experience couldn't be stopped once it started, but some people called out for Jesus, and then the whole experience just stops. So that just again shows me this is some kind of demonic experience, in my opinion, and could point to more evidence for a Christian God. Because we would expect if demons give you this kind of experience and you call out for God to save you, then the whole experience or the thing would run away. The whole experience would stop. Do you think that could be evidence, or do you think that's no evidence at all?
Yeah, I think that's evidence. Yeah.
Okay. How on a rank of 0 to 10, like where would you put such evidence, or what would you rank the highest evidence? Like what kind of evidence would you search for God? Like what would you see as the highest evidence that you actually want before you would believe in God?
So you're asking me if I were to search for evidence in favor of God existing, what would I look at?
Or like what would convince you? Like sometimes atheists don't know what would convince me. Perhaps you know. What would make you realize there's a creator? What kind of evidence? Would you need the personal experience like Paul did, or would you just say that's a hallucination perhaps? Or
Well, maybe we should clarify that there's a difference between asking what would convince you and what can you acknowledge to be enough reason for which you should believe, right? So like in epistemology, there's certain epistemic norms that rationally obligate some appraiser to believe this, updating on the information, right? But you can always imagine that you're irrational, your biases get in the way. So it seems like when you ask what would convince you, that's taken to be interpreted more so as a psychological question. Now, if you're asking me like what would I take to be, so on the other horn of your interpretation, where you're asking merely an epistemic concern of conviction, what would be taken to which I should believe God exists? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, to be fair, it seems like a strange question to ask, at least for me, because I don't think theism even makes sense for a number of reasons. But if
also, what doesn't make sense?
Yeah, like the underpinning metaphysics. Like I wouldn't understand what it means for God to. Presumably, you believe God stands in causal relations, such that He is the cause for things. It's not clear what that account of causation is, because I take a Humean or a deflationist account of causation, and it seems like for a view like that, you would be committed to like a realist notion of causation, and I don't understand those views.
So what didn't you understand about God being able to create a universe? Because we create many worlds. We follow in His footsteps. We're also cracking the DNA code, and we're probably going to program in that code. We already do. We already make our own, glow-in-the-dark fish, but we're just copying some of the code into another organism. But in the future, we'll totally crack the code and probably understand how to write it. And then the nanomolecular machines and factories at the base of life will follow our commands and will build what we tell them to build. So you also don't see like DNA could point to intelligence, and the nanomolecular machines at the base of life, and the design strategies at the base of life that scientists have found. They found like automatic error correction, files within folders, data encryption, stuff like that, which further points to intelligence.
And real fast, before we address this question, there is a super chat from Nobody on Fire. He's asking, I think this is for Maarten. Can a demon wake someone up by making them fart really loudly at 3 a.m.? Is flatulent possession evidence?
I don't know. I haven't gone into that. I think that's not a serious question, but yeah, I have seen a lot of people being woken up at 3 a.m. and it's not like it's exactly 3 a.m. Like me, my brother, and my father, we watched The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It's based on a true story, and we all woke up at 3 a.m. exactly, like 3 nights in a row or something. And I see this kind of phenomenon even happening in other people. So
Gotcha.
it's
Didn't mean to interrupt I did mean to interrupt the question there, but you can go back into
No,
that.
sure.
Sorry about that.
So yeah, I still want to make a video about this 3 a.m. phenomenon. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
Sorry,
that would actually be good evidence for ID intelligent design, but I think we should be more linear here because it seems like you're offering a couple things, but we're kind of being very fluid, jumping from point to point, and rather than digging deeper into that one article of evidence, or at least the sense of evidence you're outlining when you talk about like ID or demons or whatever else you need. So I think we should make, at least for the sake of productivity in the dialectic, we should kind of pick out which one you want to, I guess, hyperfixate on, and we can kind of dive into that.
okay, but so you think it's impossible that a creator exists for this universe?
Well, it depends what, I don't think, it depends what you're, if, like, again, if you think that God is omnibenevolent and omnipotent, and you think that evils are opposed to goods, then I would think that a being like that is impossible, due to the logical problem of evil. But broadly enough, I wouldn't say God's existing is impossible, and I wouldn't say that the Christian God, without more information, I think that the Christian God's kind of an opaque concept. It's unclear. So I wouldn't have I would kind of be reserved as to whether saying that God is impossible. Generally speaking, I don't think God is impossible, but I'm not technically convinced God is even possible. That's my genuine view. But for the sake of argument, I act as if I'm an atheist, and I think there are good reasons in favor of thinking God doesn't exist.
What are those good reasons?
Yeah, I use this argument called the dispensability argument for theism. So basically, I take it that theism is typically used to accommodate datum. So in philosophy of science, there's a distinction between accommodation and prediction. I think many of the times that there's some explanation that retrofits the datum to kind of dissolve the mystery. And I take that to be a bad epistemic practice. Those are typically seen as just so stories when they're tailored to the datum and don't have the ability to make predictions. But more generally, the issue or the argument I'm making is that when we have theistic explanations that attempt to answer questions of available information we have, like how does this happen, and we use theism, and theism is accommodating the datum, I think what you can do is you can actually make structurally identical, parity, naturalistic arguments, like a type of stalking horse, and you can have the same background of explanatory value in terms of the virtues you might consider that, like people like Dawes goes into, but the naturalists will always win on parsimony because they're limiting their ontology in the explanation.
Okay, so you said you want predictions are important. I think we can like predict stuff from the God hypothesis. Like if scientists say that the universe has always existed, we can predict from the God hypothesis that it must have a beginning, that there will be some kind of theory like the Big Bang or something that will come in and show that there's a beginning, because we know that things that have no beginning need no cause. It's probably there's no cause needed, but things that have a beginning need a cause, something that caused them to begin to exist. But I think we can also
I
like
don't accept
predict
that
stuff
causal
like say,
principle.
why not?
Yeah, I mean, there's two readings of the causal principle. There's the reading where it's a claim of metaphysical necessity, where it's in principle true that things that begin to exist have a cause, and that's saying something really robust that utilizes metaphysical modality. If you're familiar with with modal talk, so like there's like epistemic modality, or like maybe it's better said this way: there's like logical possibility, epistemic possibility, physical possibility. These are modal terms, talk about possibility, necessity, contingency. And there's a device today that's called metaphysical modality that I'm a skeptic of. I find that device to be dubious, as well as many people in contemporary philosophy are. And the argument utilizes that type of device, saying that things having a beginning, having a cause is a fact of metaphysical necessity. And it's unclear what that means. That's its own can of worms. But on the other reading where you're just saying that, it's likely, we have good reason, I think, for anything that begins to exist as a cause, and you're saying something probably inductive, I don't think we have good reasons to think that concerning inductive validity. When you do inductive inferences, typically the sample size you're using has to be representative of the whole, such that you can generalize that's true of the whole domain. And I think that we have good enough reasons to say that that's actually not the case. So on both horns, I think that we
Okay,
have
but
reasons to deny that principle.
yeah, I think a lot of people would see that the things that begin to exist usually have a cause. So it's not craziness to assume that if the universe began to exist, it needs a cause. But you can also make other predictions from the God hypothesis, like when scientists in the past said there's a lot of junk DNA, DNA. Then you can predict from the God hypothesis that that DNA should probably have a function. We would expect the creator to have function in that code. And that's what later happened. Scientists found that all the stuff that they thought was just junk actually had functions. But you can also predict, like, we would find more design strategies in the DNA code in the future that we can perhaps implement as well, and learn from. We take stuff from nature all the time. We learn from it all the time. So perhaps if there's more design strategies, lots of design strategies like automatic error correction stuff, that we can see that that points further towards intelligence. The more design strategies there are, it could further point towards intelligence. Would you agree? Won't you agree with that? If there's design strategies at the base of life?
It's not entirely clear what you mean. Also, I do want to quickly comment about the seeing causes all the time. I don't actually think that's right. I think most people have intuitions from their observations that things are caused, but causation isn't a thing you perceive as a property of objects. You can't see a cup and then perceive it has the property of being caused by X, Y, Z. You make inferences about what's the most likely cause when you observe certain phenomena. So I think most people
Yeah.
are not very rigorous, and they don't actually do the inferential part. They just kind of go along with what it seems to be the cause.
So if scientists look somewhere else in the universe and they're looking for any code, or highest form of information where it's like giving commands and instructions, and they see, if they find that, they know that this is evidence and could point to intelligence. Like, that's why they're searching for this, because it points to intelligence somewhere else in the
What would be
universe.
evidence, you're saying?
Like, say you find like, scientists always, like, they're looking out with everything, like with a lot of instruments, for any code like information that comes, especially if it's the highest form of code where it gives commands and instructions, because they know from previous experience that it probably points towards intelligence, because we know what can make that stuff. Like, we know what can make programming code. It usually comes from an initial input of intelligence. You understand?
You're saying if we find what, like a computer
Like,
with coding? What do you? I'm not
no,
exactly understanding.
no. What I mean is, like, say there's signals coming from another planet or some solar system, or and we crack the code and we find out that it actually has commands and instructions in it. Scientists would see that as evidence that there's probably intelligence somewhere else. It's not foolproof evidence, but it is evidence, good evidence, I would say.
You're saying something like
Would you agree with that?
waves that we like intercept, like
Yeah.
waves, and
Or
we can,
light, light waves. You can encode
and
information
you're saying something about like the
in
frequency
different
or
kind of
something, you can
mediums.
get a string of text, and it like reads as like instructions or something.
Yeah, anything like that. Like, even when I'm talking to you, there's instructions in my brain being processed. My mouth gives off waves, goes into the mic, converted to electric signal, and then goes through the light to you, and it gets decoded, and then you hear it, and then your brain processes that information. But what I'm saying is, like, if we find some kind of coded information somewhere else, especially when it gives like commands or instructions, like I'm telling you, you can go now.
Yeah, I would think that's an evidence. In fact, I would even admit that that's maybe a stronger evidence than the average evidence, because I actually would think, in honesty, that would be a prediction, because that datum is surprising in the hypothesis, and the hypothesis is designed before the datum such that that datum is sufficiently deemed a prediction. But nonetheless, I don't think that that evidence would be very strong, and as well as the fact that I think that we have to consider the countervailing evidence against theism.
Okay, but I wasn't talking about theism now. I was just showing that
I guess you were
if
saying
scientists are looking for, yeah, I'm gonna turn it towards God, but I'm just showing that scientists are actually looking for any kind of coded information, especially the highest form of information, which is like saying instructions and commands and expecting that there should be a reply or some kind of execution of those commands. If they find something like that elsewhere in the universe, coming from another planet or solar system, I don't think it's crazy to assume that that's super good evidence that there's intelligence elsewhere in the universe, right?
Yeah, that would be well. It's also interesting to consider what exactly is being said. in the quote unquote instructions. I would even like imagine we found the Gospel of John instead, like the whole Gospel of John. I think that would be better than like a set of instructions saying like, do this, do that, read your Bible. I think if we just found the Gospel of John in like light waves, then that's going to be a stronger motivator for theism.
Yeah, but see what I studied industrial engineering, so I love machines and factories and programming code and stuff like that because I saw how much intelligence is required to make stuff like that. So when I saw like some stuff like this elsewhere in the universe, I was like, whoa, this is like super good evidence for creator. So if scientists like look out and they see some kind of commands and instructions being sent to us, especially if there's machines, whatever the machine form is, metal or biological, and they're following those instructions and carrying it out and working together in like a factory format to execute those instructions, like that would just point more towards intelligence for me, wouldn't it for you?
Yeah, like I said, I'm fine to concede that, and for the reason that I think that's a novel prediction that would be generated. So I think that would be stronger than the everyday evidence one might think, that one might turn to in trying to defend theism. I think if we found something like what you're describing, that would be stronger than the most evidence that I'm anticipating from someone offering. But like I said, there's a lot more to consider than just if that's strong, right? There's a large body of other nuances to consider, like the prior probability, how likely is the hypothesis before the evidence, whether there's candidate explanations that also predict the datum, or even, though it might not be a prediction of another explanation, there might be another candidate explanation that doesn't per se predict the datum, but it does have other explanatory virtues going in favor, such that, though not predicted, overcompensates by the other explanatory commodities, such that we might still prefer that alternative explanation. Or there's one move that many don't like, but even if it were the case, you had some explanation that's greater than a selection of other candidate explanations, I might think the probability of the set of the candidate exceed the probability. So the probability to any one of those is still greater than that specific explanation, and it's not clear why I would think that it's any one of those or the aggregate of any one of those than that particular explanation. But to just go more slower and step by step, I think we might maybe want to assess how likely is theism before the evidence.
Okay, but so you wouldn't see. I like that you say this is like good evidence for intelligence, right? That's what you kind of say, right? That if we find some kind of signal like that, giving commands and instructions to some kind of machines or factory, whatever form they are, that would be good evidence pointing towards intelligence, right? Not foolproof, but good evidence, right?
Like you said about lights, if we found light with like Bible verses,
yeah, encoded in light or encoded in some other kind of.
Yeah, I think that those would be novel predictions that Christianity has on offer. That would be a pretty hefty evidence.
Okay, so if we find the same thing at the base of life, like scientists have found that there's a code at the base of life, and that there are nanomolecular machines and factories working together. Like even copying just the DNA code requires multiple nanomolecular machines, and you get machines that double check the code as well. Like our computers also double check our code. Like when I'm sending the code to you, they double check the code because there's errors that get in. But some errors still sometimes slip through, even in our computers, when copying code.
Yeah, I mean, it's not technically accurate to say there's code in DNA, but there are certain patterns that are...
Why is it not accurate?
Yeah, code deals with, at least I'm not a computer science expert, but the way I understand, one is that code already assumes intentionality. Because code is the import of some type of coder. But there's like it's probably like a technical definition offered in computer science of what code is, which I could probably look up. But I would think it's not accurate.
Yeah, look it up first. Because Richard Dawkins says it's that it's code. I think Bill Gates also says it's a code. I think if I'm paraphrasing, but I think he said something like the DNA code is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any program we ever created. But there is a code. It's not called the DNA code for no reason, right? So there is a code, and we can even store our computer code on DNA. That's how much it is a code. And we're cracking the code more and more. According to scientists, we're cracking that code more and more, figuring out what codes for what. So we can, if we read the code, you put it into a computer, it can predict your eye color, what your eye color is, your hair color. All of that is encoded in that code in each of our cells.
I'm reading, and it says in computer science, a code is a set of instructions written in a specific programming language that tells a computer how to perform a task. But I guess we don't really need a quibble on code. If by code you just mean something like, akin to like a sequence of words you can somehow deduce from like some, I don't know, DNA pattern that you can somehow. It's not really clear how you do that or what that would mean, but if you can somehow find a sequence of words and string them together in a way that has like syntax and whatnot, and it says like a whole thing, you might think that, you might say that's code and that's the motivation to believe in theism, and I'm fine to say that, just so that we're clear.
So like Richard Dawkins even says like the machine code of the genes is uncannily computer-like. Apart from differences in jargon, the pages of a molecular biology journal might be interchanged with those of a computer engineering journal.
Yeah, I mean, he's using probably code in the same sense that you're
So
using.
like,
I'm saying that there's a more like technical way it's used in computer science, and it's not right to use it that way. And that supposing.
But that's in computer science. I'm talking about
yeah.
What's the definition of code according to? Like you get different kinds of code. Like people in World War II were encoding information, and they were sending codes, secret codes. And then if you can crack that code, you know what the person is sending to the other guy,
But
and then you can
examples of code have
win the battle.
intention. But if by code you just mean something like you can convert a series of things into words, and that's what you mean by code, it's not really clear what that would even mean in the context of DNA. I understand to say maybe if we've got even more microscopic lenses or something that we can find like more fundamental particles or something, some set of engravings on the cells or something that reads like some Bible verse. But it's kind of peculiar how code's being used here, but at least I'm saying that, yeah, if we found something like how I'm describing, if we found like writings on the cell, on human DNA cells or something, that of like Bible verses or something, that would be some reason to think that God exists, but it would be a good.
Or yeah, you can also explain it by saying some other intelligence might have put it there, or we might have put it there, or so it's not foolproof though. That I like the DNA and the design strategies in that. Sorry.
No, yeah, I just agree. Yeah, it's not like decisive evidence.
Yeah. So, like, and I think better evidence for me is the design strategies in the DNA code and the nanomolecular machines and factories carrying out the instructions in that code. That stuff points more towards intelligence for me than just writing some Bible verse in the code.
You're saying the structure of
each person has a different. Each person likes some kind of evidence more than another person, right? So we should just make sure biases don't blind us. Like with flat earthers, they're like totally blinded by their massive biases, you know?
So you
should always be open
to
for
evidence, the structure of the DNA?
I'm saying like scientists are finding design strategies within the DNA. Like in our computer code, if someone cracks our code, they can find design strategies written into the code. Like automatic error correction, files within folders, data encryption and decryption. Like I'm sending you data right now, and it's being decrypted by your computer and by your brain. Like the signals go to your ear, your brain decrypts it, and you know what I'm actually saying to you.
Yeah, I'm not entirely clear what you're saying. You're saying that are you saying that there's like we allegorically have files, or are you saying that we literally? I'm not entirely understanding what you're saying.
I watched a scientist, and he gave a presentation on why it points towards intelligence, and he was also saying like one of the guys were like saying that someone like the design strategies, like he was a computer scientist or something, and he said like the design strategies in the DNA code, like it feels like someone figured out this stuff way before it. Like automatic error correction is a design strategy in our code.
What is that?
Like it checks for that.
Automatic design or automatic error correction.
No, like you build automatic error. It's like when you send me a text, the code is checked by the machine, double checked, and it says, okay, you wrote something wrong here. Do you want to change it? And it can fix it automatically for you. You can even set it to fix it automatically for you. Now, if you find something like that in a computer, it points towards intelligence. The same in DNA, I think. It can point towards intelligence.
I understand what they mean.
If you understand
for there to be auto auto error correction or whatever in computers, but I'm not exactly understanding what that would mean in the context of like someone's DNA.
Like scientists, I've heard scientists say that there's a machine that runs down and double checks the DNA to see if there's any errors, and if it finds an error, it fixes it. That points to me towards intelligence. There's even machines that when the DNA is tangled, there's a machine that clips the DNA and untangles the DNA. A literal machine that untangles it. It clips the one strand, pushes it through, and then binds it again. So it untangles your DNA because the DNA is constantly being twirled around. It fixes that, then it's not going to be able to be copied. So there's literal machines there that, and scientists call it nanomolecular machines. They themselves call it machines because it functions like a machine.
Well, I'm trying to get clear specifically on what is the autocorrection in the context of the DNA.
So you know, in computers or with your text, there's automatic error correction. Like you can set your phone to automatic error correct your spelling. You can set
I
the
understand
computer.
that, but, like in the context of
So
DNA,
when I'm talking to you, the computer sends extra information to you, and then at your side it decodes it and checks the informations, because sometimes some of the information gets lost when seeing it over the internet. It double checks it and checks if there might be some digit that flipped, and then fixes that. That requires intelligence. It points usually towards intelligence. Now, scientists seem to be able to find that same kind of design strategy in DNA.
Yeah, but what is it? I'm not understanding what it means for that design, that type of thing to appear in DNA.
So automatic error correction.
Yeah. How does
So
that play in DNA?
whenever you copy a code, there's errors. Like errors usually sometimes pops in for whatever reason. In a computer, the same. And thus, you need some kind of design strategy that checks those errors and fixes them. If you burn onto a CD information, then it also double checks that. And DNA is 1,000 times more accurate than us burning it onto a CD, because there's the nanomolecular machines that run down and double checks the DNA to see
Like,
if there's
in the
a
context of DNA,
error
what
somewhere.
is an error supposed to be, and what is an error correction supposed to be?
Like say there's some kind of radiation or something that flips one of the that changes one of the digits in the DNA code. There seems to be, according to scientists, that a lot of the sections is destroyed. Then there seems to be a checking of the DNA code. Even like when you inbreed, the DNA code seems to not be able to fix that error. But if you have two copies and the one has an error in, it usually fixes that error. It checks against each other and fixes that error. It's not foolproof, but it can then fix that error. While if you just are inbreeding, which is why inbreeding is not so good at the moment, because we have so many errors in it. In the past, it didn't matter that much. I think there was a lot of inbreeding in the past, because
I'm still not getting what an error is supposed to be with respect to DNA.
like diseases or mutations, like bad mutations. That's a kind of a error.
Those might be the examples of error. And what's the intention of error? So, like, what's the semantics behind error in context of DNA?
Like DNA seems to be designed to fix errors as well. Like it's fighting against mutations, like fighting against
that error seems
massive
like
negative mutations.
Right? Errors are normative notions, right? So it seems like you're talking about some notion of normativity, right? And it's not clear if that's right, if you're using error in a normative or non-normative way. So I'm trying to understand if by error, what is that supposed to be saying? Maybe you can explicate what an error is in the context of DNA. Is it like goal oriented, or
like? Yeah, say there's like a error that you lose your eye. The programming code for that eye becomes corrupted, and so if your DNA has that at the when you're embryo, and we fix that, okay, we go in there in your cells and we fix it. That would point towards intelligence, but it seems like someone designed the DNA to automatically fix that. Usually, there's a lot of automatic error correction built into the DNA to fight
about the correction stuff and how that's like indicative of design strategy. But what I'm trying to understand is, in context of DNA, whatever concepts like error and fixing and encryption, and we're being awfully too allegorical in a way that's too naive to understanding the epistemic project and context to ID intelligent design here. So I'm trying to understand, one, specifically about error, what is meant by error, whether that's normative or non-normative, and whatever else.
Okay, so I asked ChatGPT now, and it says like the cell has sophisticated DNA repair mechanisms that constantly monitor and fix errors that occurs during DNA replication or due to damage from radiation, chemicals, or other sources.
So
No,
there is
that
a
what you mean by error?
super chat.
Sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me,
So
what did you say?
Oh yeah, I was just saying there are a couple super chats actually directly related to this part of the conversation. So Michael, the Canadian atheist, thank you so much for the super chat. He says if autocorrection is a thing, explain genetic defects and things like Down syndrome.
Yeah, so the code fights against it, but sometimes if you have too much radiation or some things, then it overcomes even the automatic error correction. You can get the same with the computers. Computers are constantly being bombarded from space, and it switches sometimes their 0 to a 1, and then it can cause a massive error in computer, and the computer fails, or you get a blue screen of death. Or I've even seen someone winning a election, a small election, and they figured out one of the digits was flipped. That's how the person won. But they realized there was something wrong because there was more people voting for this person than there was almost taking part in this election. So they realized that one of the digits flipped from that radiation.
Sounds like
Gotcha. Do you have
evidence
anything to say to that one, Monkey Boy?
Yeah, I mean, if he's failing with respect to the system in place, where that's understood as to be an error that wants to be squashed, and the error seems to obtain, it seems like he's failing with respect to his desires, which implies maybe something like a weak God.
Yeah, I'm just reading scientists.
And then
I think
Austin Sims says everything Maarten is saying is wrong. DNA is not a code. Nobody but creationists / ID types call things molecular machines. He's regurgitating BS. Do you have any comments or response to that?
no, there's a lot of people. Richard Dawkins calls the DNA code a code. Stated clearly, debated T jump on it. He totally won T jump. Both are atheists, and he said it's a code. You can go and watch that debate on Modern Day Debate. He totally proved that it's a code and how many similarity it has to our code. And the molecular machines, go and check. Scientists are talking about it. There's a lot of scientists that study molecular machines in our body, and they call it the molecular machines. And it functions like machines. It has functions. It doesn't. Scientists don't just call it molecular machines for no reason. You understand? It actually has functions, and they work together in a factory format to copy DNA. Even multiple machines work together just to copy DNA. One machine splits the DNA, and then other machines do other functions.
Gotcha. And that's all the super chats I need to read for right now.
If I can say as
Okay,
an unrelated thing, I don't know how happy Tacos is going to be hearing this, but if anyone here wants to, I'm like a broke college student. You can like Venmo me or send me money. That'd be great too. Yeah, word up.
What are you talking about?
I need.
He's saying he's welcoming all super chats to him too. Or
Okay. Okay.
Well, you
I'm
can't.
sure you
send
got
me
a
super chat.
PayPal or something on your YouTube, right?
Yeah, well, it's in my community post. Maybe I should put it somewhere more easier to find. But yeah,
I got you linked to in the description.
I got a link tree. Let me actually put that in my YouTube bio. Should have been done this. But yeah, we could get back to the debate.
Okay.
Unless there's
Where do you
more,
want to go from? Like, I think also we should take care with biases. Like, I think a lot of people are massively blinded by huge biases. So we should always be aware of. Everyone has biases, okay, but we should be aware of our biases. Like flat earthers have massive biases against any evidence that point to them being wrong. So it's much harder to show them that there's good evidence for the Earth being round. You understand?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to understand still. To like break away from the allegory, what exactly an error is supposed to be? Is an error a failure to meet the intent of the coder? Is that what an error is understood here to mean? Because that just presumes intentionality, and that would just be question begging.
Like, so you won't say that someone say there's a massive section that's corrupted in the DNA code from some radiation or something. You won't say that's now an error. So another guy doesn't have his arm or some kind of sickness he gets from that mutation. You won't see that as an error in the code.
Well, I don't know much about the semantics behind error enough to say. That's why I'm trying to clarify if by error we mean failure to meet the end of the coder.
Like scientists use this kind of language in biology. like natural copying mistakes during cell division is also seen as an error, or UV radiation from the sun can also cause errors, and chemicals and viruses and such things can cause errors in the DNA code.
Yeah, but I'm asking specifically a semantic question. So what is error supposed to be cashed out to mean?
Like there's something wrong. It's not supposed, like cancer is a
but
mutation.
wrong is a normative concept. So when you say wrong, is it wrong as in it's failing to meet one's aim? Is it like agent relative, that with respect to a specific agent's desires, it's failing to realize their desire? Is that what you're saying?
So like say in a computer and there's an error, okay, and then the whole computer crashes. Now you get the same in a human DNA. There's some kind of error from radiation or something, and then the whole thing crashes. The person dies from it, or you can get a baby that doesn't even live because of the error, massive error from radiation or some other chemical.
So
No, I
Austin
understand
Sims
that's an
submitted.
example, but
So you understand it in a computer, but you struggle to understand it in the DNA code.
So Austin Sims submitted a super chat directly related to this, saying DNA is a molecule that causes protein synthesis. That's what biologists mean by code. It codes 4 proteins. Behe and his ILK are the ones using machine. And then also there was another person that submitted a couple of super chats. They were asking if you agree with evolution.
Yeah, I believe in evolution. I think it's a form of good design to program an organism to adapt to its surroundings. It's a form of good design. It's like our AI. They follow. We design them, and then they can function on their own after we design them. They can start making stuff or improving themselves or stuff like that. But I wanted to get back to that previous super chat. Just go to that previous super chat.
oh, I actually got a gift after. Go ahead. I got a shout out my gift
Okay, so
too.
yeah, the awesome thing is computers are binary, so there's charge and no charge. We say 1 or 0. And the DNA code is quadantry, so there's 4 digits. So you can store much more information in the DNA code than in computer code because it has 4 digits instead of just 2 digits. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add there. But sorry, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I want to
Monkey
thank
Boy?
Matthew for the 20 dono. Thank you. You're a goat and a legend. If there's no more donos, yeah, we could get back to the debate.
Okay,
Is
so you
that it,
got
Taco,
some.
or?
Yeah, that's all for right now. I'm trying not to jump in too much during the debate portion. I generally jump in a little bit during the. I'm more moderator, right?
No, you're doing good. Yeah, it's all cool. Yeah. So my error is that I understand that. I take it that normative concepts are just agent relative. At least for the most part, I use normative notions in subjectivist ways, even though I'm technically a pluralist. But for context here, what I'm not understanding is how error is being used, because if error just means, because by error you cash that out as something's going wrong with respect to a question of an agent's goals, or if it's some other notion of maybe stance independent normative, like objective norms. Because if you're saying it's failing DNA's failing with respect to someone's intention, that just seems like that's question begging for ID.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm using what scientists call it's errors. Like just like in a computer, the whole computer can crash from an error. The same with humans. If there's a massive error in the DNA code, it's going to crash. That's what scientists mean with the error in the code.
Yeah,
Do you
but
understand?
yeah, but that's precisely the point, because that's so. Do you understand what normativity is? Like right, wrong.
Hmm.
Yeah, I take it
I
like
think
things
so.
are like right with respect to people's goals. And if you're saying that there's an error that comes about in DNA, you're saying that that's something that's failing to reach the agent's desires. That there's some agent.
Yeah,
in
perhaps the
question.
biology guys want life to continue, so they call it the error. So, what's wrong with that
Oh, so you're just saying it's an error with respect to the particular person
in
who has that
biology?
DNA.
Yeah,
Okay.
and to the I think biologists wants to improve life and want life to flourish. So they also call it probably. That's also why they probably call it the error.
Okay. So
No
yeah,
need for God in that equation.
there's errors in DNA, but what does that have to do with thinking that DNA is a design strategy or whatever?
No, I'm saying there is the design strategy of automatic error correction in the DNA. Like cells have built-in repair mechanisms to fix most errors.
Oh,
Like
wait,
it's
actually,
fixing
yeah.
itself. It's built into.
Yeah, then if that's what you mean by error, I actually don't think that there is. I don't see reason to think that there's error correction.
But that's what scientists say. Biology scientists say that there's automatic error correction in cells and in the DNA code.
Yeah, but if
Like you can type it on the internet and check it if you don't believe me. Like check scientists, they will tell you that these things are in there.
The thing is, I'm not convinced that the scientists are using error the way you said, because when asked what meant by error, you said that it's failing to realize one's desires, and that desire is relative to the person in question having that DNA. So you're saying that there's like some type of bodily process that acts to work in favor of the intentions of the person, and I don't see any reason to think biology works in that way, and I find it implausible to think that that's the semantics behind what the scientists are saying.
So what do you think the scientists mean with there's error in the code, and that the DNA fixes that error? It fights against errors in the code.
I don't have enough of a scientific, enough tenets of science to really make a judgment about what is likely they're saying. This might just be like nomenclature associated with the sciences. So they might be technical terms when talking about code. So I don't really have an idea of what it might be that they're talking about. But I have good enough reasons to think it's not what you're saying, given the consequence of what it
How
is
so?
from what you're saying. Yeah, because it's a consequence of what you mean by code, that the
Like-
body acts to work in favor of the desires of the person having that DNA. So if I have like certain mutations, so long as I desire those mutations to not be there, my body would act to fight against it. Or if I desired for
I'm not
the
saying that.
mutation to spread, that it would act to like help the mutation procreate or whatever, become more prevalent.
No, I'm not saying that. It's like, do you know your liver has 500 functions according to scientists? It has 500 functions.
Or function
know that?
also sounds like teleological language.
Well,
Yeah,
scientists
okay.
call it functions. It has. Do you think it has no function?
If by function you just mean it's disposed to act in a way that's purpose neutral, then I would agree.
Like, do you think your eye has a function?
Yeah, and the way I
Like
described
it's-
function, then yeah, I would think it has a function.
Okay, so if the code gets an error and it loses that function, you wouldn't see that as an error in the code that makes you lose functions that your body needs
No,
to survive.
I'm not convinced that you're using error in the way outlined earlier, and it's unclear what then you do mean by error. So that's where I'm still finding it strange what it is you're saying when you invoke error.
Say we didn't know who made computers. We just found a computer, and I told you like radiation or space sometimes causes, and the closer you are to space, the more it does that. Actually, it causes one of the digits to flip and cause an error in the computer. Would you
The
then
question is,
understand
what
it
do you
even
mean
if
by
we
error?
like the computer crashes?
Um,
Like, what's the definition of error?
yeah, I searched it up, and it's something like a mistake, defect, or malfunction within a computer system. So basically, the computer system is operating or acting in a way that's opposed to the desires of the one who manufactured or coded it, right? So there's a notion tied. So that concept there of error is wedded to intentionality, right? And that's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay, but say we have no. Okay, so you say you're scared of the word error because it points towards intentionality. So you can't use just
Yeah, to
error
affirm that
as
there's error
meaning
just
a
question
deviation.
for idea.
What?
Yeah, use of error language is just question begging in this context.
Okay, so if scientists use that error, it's just question begging for idea what?
Well, I'm not convinced that scientists are using it the way you're describing, and if that is what they're saying, then I would agree that that's question begging for idea. I don't see reason to think that there is that, because that doesn't even seem like a claim sensitive to the sciences. That seems more so a philosophical claim.
But so
Because that's
you can't
talk of
see
Silo's
that.
intention or the purpose behind DNA sequences. The sciences don't
But
deduce
see, so
purposes.
perhaps we. I wonder how many definitions there are of error, like, because you could probably get different kinds of errors, right? There's probably different kinds of errors as well.
I mean, since you used AI, and given I'm not acquainted with science well, I think it's fair to at least search up what error means in this context and to clarify whether it's understood to be something normative. So I'll search up error in the context to talk about DNA sequences. DNA sequences.
So people try and say this is not evidence for Jesus. It kind of is, right? Because you need lots of evidence that God exists for the probability of Jesus being a true God to increase. Like we need. So if we have a lot of evidence that there must be a creator, then our hypothesis that Christ is the creator increases.
Yeah.
Than before we had any evidence of God. If there's no evidence of God, the probability.
Because I was kind of distracted. I searched up what's meant by error here.
Yeah,
sorry about that. No, some people just complaining about
gave a super chat. Discordian, you're like a fan of mine, so send me money too. Sorry, continue.
And they did say main reason to believers call DNA a code is to invoke a coder and smuggle intention into a natural process and obfuscate science with fluoride analogies.
No. That both Richard Dawkins and Stated Theory, John Perry from Stated Theory, they're atheists. They're atheist scientists in biology, and they clearly say it's a code. Even though many atheists hate it when they say that. They even debate it with people, especially John Perry. He would go on debates with atheists claiming it's not a code. And go and check modern day debates. I think he did an excellent job in showing atheists that it's a code. Anyway, what did you say about the error? You got something about the error or something?
Yeah, so I searched it up and it says that DNA or error in context to DNA talk is a technical term and is non-normative and does not refer to rightness or wrongness. It simply describes the sequencing machine misidentifies a base, for example, reading a C where there was actually a T. There's a technical, these are technical failures of the equipment or process, not biological mistakes.
Okay, but it's called error, right? Isn't a synonym for error a mistake?
It seems like it's talking about the machinery and not actually a notion of failure with reference to the biology.
No, you get different kinds of error. You get different kinds of error in the DNA code. You can get the machines to... The same with computers. You get different kinds of errors in a computer as well. Copying errors or errors that come from space radiation or other errors. The same with the DNA code.
Let me see.
And yeah, if someone wants to double check what I say, I can always send a link, or if you want to see the debate where I think Stated Clearly did an excellent job defending, then I would gladly send it.
Yeah, it's using sources like University of North Texas, the PNAS, and Genome Biology Studies. It says that error in context to biology is talk about they are referring to a mistake made by the technology used in the lab, not naturally occurring in the biological events. It says
but that's just some of
biological error to refer to mutations, though.
Yeah, see, there's another kind of error. There's different kinds of errors.
Okay, it says in context to mutation, it refers to a failure in the biological process of accurately copying DNA. Yeah, I can understand. There's I wouldn't even say this is technically normatively neutral, but because it's using failure talk. But if all it's saying is that it's not accurately copying DNA, and that's all that's meant by an error, I'm fine with saying, yeah, then there are biological errors, and okay, what's the consequence then from that?
Yeah, but so it seems like there's design strategy, just like in our computers, fight against errors. And it seems like there's design strategies built in the DNA code to fight against errors, to fix errors, and to try and stop it from happening. Obviously, it's not foolproof.
So you're saying that there's some biological function where the DNA attempts to fight against mutation. Is that right? And stuff like that?
Yeah, errors from any sort of thing, from copying or from radiation or
Okay,
some
yeah,
other
I agree
kind
with
of.
that. But I guess the further question just is why would I even think that that's a reason in favor of thinking intelligent design is right, or that intelligent design is true?
Because we know that automatic error correction, design strategies like automatic error correction, we see that it usually comes from intelligence. It's not foolproof, obviously. You can say it comes from AI, but if you go back with AI, even you usually find intelligence as an initial input. We have no examples of it not having an initial input.
Yeah, I agree. We have reason to think that of the instances of that are designed by humans, that we have trivial reasons to think that those are a product of intelligence. But I'm not seeing why I think that's true of DNA.
What do you mean?
Yeah, when we find these facts in the DNA, I don't see why I would think that that's some reason in favor of it being designed. Now, it is true that humans create similar constructs. DNA, they do similar constructs allegorically when we were talking about like computer computation and stuff like that. But I don't see how that's a reason in favor of thinking that the DNA itself is designed, because we do have background independent reasons to think that computer coding has a designer. But the question then just is why I think that DNA code has a designer.
Like, for example, say me and you, or we as a human race make robots on another planet, and we make an artificial intelligence that fixes robots, that designs new robots to equip them better to be on the planet, depending on what happens on the planet. And they don't see us at all because we're gone. We left them on the planet. Then those robots can look at the design strategies at the base of them and figure out that it points to intelligence. Now, the same is true, I think, for the DNA code. If you understand what I mean, there's some clues in the code that points towards intelligence. The same with these robots would find some clues pointing towards intelligence, even if it functions on its own after it's been created.
Yeah, I don't think I accept that though.
Understand? So you don't think those machines would be able to find clues in the code or in them, even that there's some kind of intelligence that made them?
Well, I think maybe the robots
And-
might think that, but I don't see why for us, when we observe our DNA code, that there's any reason for us to think that there's a design behind it.
What would we expect to find if we were designed? Wouldn't we expect to find a lot of design strategies in the DNA code? Or a lot of chicken and egg problems where you need multiple machines to get the DNA to be copied.
On
And
the bare
you also need
hypothesis,
machines
though, that there's just a designer, I don't think one that you would expect any design strategies, because it's consistent with a designer that they make it such that there's no design strategies that are apparent to the person under any degree of epistemic investigation. And two, that there's an underdetermination in the possible collection of variant design strategies such that it underdetermines which we would expect, right? Because any of them are consistent with any given desire of a designer. So if we had a designer generically, it's not clear if we would even expect there to be a design strategy. If we do, of which we would expect, such that it becomes like ambiguous.
So you think there's no correlation between design strategies and intelligence?
Well, there's correlation so far as you also compare it to computer programming, that there's a correlation. But I don't think that there's good reasons to think that the DNA of code, or the code of DNA, is designed.
I see there's a super chat here that says,
Yes, I was just
Maarten,
waiting to jump in.
you
So
gonna read it?
Nobody in Fire was asking, Maarten, if God is perfect and he designed the code, why does it objectively suck? Why did he whoopsie and cause cancer? Why did dinosaurs have cancer?
I think the code is awesome, and the more we crack it, the more we're going to see how awesome it is. I think scientists called our cells that it has programmed cell death, and if you get an error in that programmed cell death, that causes cancer. Then the cell doesn't die anymore. That's what cancer is. It just starts mutating without dying. It's not following that programmed cell death function that it's supposed to follow. Then you get all this bad stuff happening.
And let's make sure that we're tying the topics that we're going into back into the overall topic. Just make sure that it's explaining how this is good evidence for the Christian God, and because you're supporting the Christian God specifically, and
yeah. So like I call it like level 1, like all the evidence pointing towards the creator, and then on level 2 you figure out who the creator is. But all this evidence that there is a creator points towards the hypothesis that the Christian God is the true God, like more. It points to that, and it makes it more likely. Like if we had no evidence for God being true, we were speaking now of some of the evidence, but if we had no evidence, then the likelihood that the Christian God is a true God, because there's no evidence, is less. That's why we're discussing the evidence for a creator at the moment. So it's not off topic, I think, but we can get back to the Christian God if you like more directly to the Christian God. I don't know if Monkey Boy has been a Christian at one point or what happened. Were you a Christian at one point, Monkey Boy?
Yeah, I was.
For how long?
Like 16 years.
Oh, that's awesome. So, and did you experience no evidence for the Christian God in that 16 years, or did you experience some evidence, or did you just blindly believe, or what happened?
For most of it, I was dogmatic, and then towards the later half a year that I was a Christian of the 16 year, I was an apologist. I started like reading into philosophy and stuff, and doing debate, and then eventually it like dissuaded me. I kept reading and watching debates, and I found really hard to manage to even make sense of theism.
Okay. So what was the biggest thing that changed your mind and said, like, Christian God is no Christian God?
The first was responses to the contingency argument that I've heard from a now friend of mine named Jack Engstreich, and as well as his rendition to the LPOE. And when I heard those two arguments from him, those were the contingency argument was a prominent argument I would run, as well as the Kalam, and I've heard his responses there too. So I guess it's the three of those. Once I've heard his responses adequately deal with contingency and Kalam, and then I've heard his LPOE, which at the time I was committed to the stipulated propositions naively. I found it really odd. So I started listening. I don't want to like lore dump this whole time, nor glaze this old fart Jack too much, but I also heard his stuff about God existing in an external world, and how external worlds furnish content and stuff like that, and stuff about global skepticism as a consequence of theism and all that, and kind of just made me think like theism is like to put it crudely, like a bowl of horseshit, to be honest.
So what made you first believe it, though? Was there, you say it was just bad evidence that made you believe, you just blindly believed it without evidence, or what?
Yeah, for most of my years, way before I was an apologist, I would just ritualistically go to church and stuff, attend church, pray, all that stuff. I thought it was obvious. I thought it was like, how can you look at the sky and stuff, the beauty, and think that there's not an artist? Or, I was like, oh, all these scientists have an agenda against God. The Big Bang is the most stupidest thing. Particles colliding, creating the universe. Very, very like impoverished understanding of like the science and pretty much everything. I didn't even know what philosophy was at the time. I probably thought philosophy was like poetry, very poetic nonsense, and like questioning everything for all day. But once I started debating, which I didn't begin starting debating religion, I was debating other stuff. But once I started doing that, then eventually religion kind of got swept in. And then from there, that's when I started taking debate and endeavors into philosophy more serious. And I found genuine concerns with maintaining the belief that God exists.
Okay. And so you say, you won't say there's no evidence for God, right?
No, generally no. I think there's just really, really bad evidence.
Okay. So what would you, if you can explain to me give me multiple examples of what you would say is good evidence?
Yeah, the best
if we had such a thing.
evidence, like I said in the beginning, would be fine-tuning and psychophysical harmony arguments.
Yeah, but if you can make up a hypothetical, like what would you say is like, this would be good evidence if we actually had it, like some hypothetical thing that if we had it, you would say, okay, we definitely have some good evidence.
I'm not sure, to be honest.
So you don't know what would be good evidence for a creator?
No, not really, no.
So there's nothing that God can possibly do to show like
maybe something like if
he
I found
exists,
that there's for the Christian God, if I found out like there's an exact number of fundamental particles that mirror the number of Bible verses, and then we found out that for every particle there's one Bible verse, and then there's like maybe a hierarchy of the particles where we can like organize the particles as a hierarchy, and we can get like the order of the verses as in the Bible, like canonically. Would I think that's like a really good reason to think God exists?
I don't think many atheists would think that's good. evidence that God exists, though.
I think that'd be mistaken.
Also,
I think that, well, there's like technical, like we could talk about like why that would be in a Bayesian apparatus, why that would be very incredible evidence that is very much predicted on theism, such that I think it would be incredible confirmation for the hypothesis. But that seems like a complex task to kind of go into explaining. But to put it short, yeah, I think that an atheist, I might even become a Christian updating on that. I'm not entirely certain. Because again, there's like a lot of other countervailing evidence in my
okay, so
book
it won't be
Fires,
even good evidence, good enough to make you a Christian.
but, I'm not entirely sure.
So you
I
can't
believe
think
that
of
might be.
any super good evidence that God could possibly give you.
I think that would
that
be
he
the
exists.
closest, what I just described.
Okay, that's the best that you can come up with
Yeah, probably.
at the moment. Because I think there's far better evidence for God than that. Like I don't understand 100% how you see that as good evidence. Like I don't know the logic. Perhaps you can explain it to me better. Like how this points to God existing
Yeah, you might consider that to
in
be
layman's terms, perhaps.
something like revelation. You might expect that if a God existed and he wanted to make himself known, that he would put the Bible verses engraved into particles in order such that the order parodies the order canonically in the Bible, such that you would have good enough reasons to think God exists.
So what particles are you talking about though? Like
Yeah, supposing that they're like our fundamental particles to show like the base of the physical world has like the Bible engraved in it.
like I saw, which I think is perhaps
We can
better
like
evidence.
derive the
Like
Bible, the whole
scientists are
Bible from
beginning.
fundamental physics.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but like what I find as also good evidence is scientists are beginning to find not just at the base of life code, but at the base of the universe as well. You can see multiple scientists with Neil deGrasse Tyson chatting about this, and he published his evidence that they're finding programming code at the base of the universe as well. And you can see Neil deGrasse Tyson knows that this points towards intelligence, and he's like running to people, asking him like, "Come up with a counter, please!" Like save me from this this argument.
Wait, from
So
what
I don't know if
argument?
you know about that as well. From the argument that they're finding code at the base of the universe as well, and we know from previous experience that programming code usually points towards intelligence. So
Yeah, but
and I don't think he
I
likes
don't
that.
accept that.
What
Like, given how the dialectic has went so far, I don't think that code, the way we're understanding code to
programming code?
yeah, like how we've been talking for the whole conversation. If that was like unveiled, I wouldn't think that that's good reason to think theism is
You don't
true.
think programming code at the base of life would point towards intelligence?
Well, if you're talking about it in the same way you have been, then no, I don't think it would.
Okay, what kind of code would do the job?
I don't know, the code that we can make a good inference to a designer from.
Okay, so what kind of code is that?
I'm not sure. I don't know anything about coding. I'm not sure how from code we can make good inferences to designers and what would be the best configuration of code that is most likely to be expected on the hypothesis. Like this kind of goes back to the thing about bare designers and how we would have to add like auxiliary conditions to what facts of code they would even, or facts of design they would even want.
So you can't tell me what kind of code, because you say you
This is consistent with the designer
really
that
that
makes
well.
worlds with no DNA.
What?
Like you can imagine that we have the same, practically the same world. We have like an analogous world where in that world there just isn't DNA found in organisms and their insides are fairly simple, right? That's a world that's also consistent with the designer, and it's not clear how that's any less expected than on the world where there's complex physical structures. Such that I don't see how.
Yeah, I think if you see more functions and higher forms of programming code, you can deduce or figure out how intelligent a creator might be. You can get some clues to how intelligent something is. Like if we found some alien technology and we can analyze it and see what design strategies it has and how complex it is. Not really complex, but how many functions and stuff. Like one thing has like a liver has 500 functions, stuff like that. Like our cell phones has many functions. The more functions usually point towards intelligence. If something has no function, it usually points towards the other way.
But I don't accept that.
It's evidence against the creator. You don't think? Why do you think biological scientists try to show things that have no function as evidence against God. You don't realize that function usually has to do with. You don't realize why they do that.
Yeah, if you use function in the teleologically neutral way, then I actually don't see why functions would serve any epistemic merit in context to intelligent design.
And I would like to point to both of y'all back to the topic: is there good evidence for the Christian God? Because you should be presenting evidence for the Christian God here, right?
Yeah. Okay, we
I
can
mean, a
go
strategy
back
might
to
be
the
more generally inferring a God and then making additional arguments that
Oh, gotcha.
show how. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just making sure it's on topic, right?
Yeah, it is on topic, but we can go more directly to the Christian God. Like I said, many people come in contact with and testify and put their lives on the line when they testify, especially Muslims. They put their lives on the line the most because Muhammad calls for their death for
Well, if they do it the
leaving
most,
Islam.
that'd be
So if they
evidence against Christianity. No, I'm just trying.
What?
Because I'm saying that if you're saying that the Muslims, they put their heart into it the most, like they're the extremists, they're typically the extremists, that would be evidence for Islam being true rather than. Oh, hold on, my laptop's
I don't know. Sorry, like see, what are you talking about? You're talking about the guys that blow themselves up, and that's just evidence that they really believe what they're saying and they're willing to die for it. But if someone puts their life on the line when testifying about coming in contact with God, and then they realize they were deceived the whole time, and they become a Christian, and it's a Muslim, because if they testify, many Muslims get killed for leaving Islam. So if you publicly testify that you came in contact with God and you can't stop talking about it, and you're putting your life on the line, it's like the disciples, what they saw with Jesus. They were beaten and told to stop. They couldn't. They just kept preaching what they saw. They couldn't stop spreading the good news.
Yeah, but that
even if
tells you
people
something
threaten
about
them
how
with
confident they
death.
are in believing. But I don't see how that does anything to tell you about.
Yeah,
how
that's
it
evidence
warrants them to
for their
believe that.
confidence in what they experience.
No, I don't deny that these people
Yeah, but I'm
are
saying that's
confident.
evidence for. Yeah. So I'm just saying that they experience something. Now you can explain it, try and explain it away in some other kind of way, but they really experience. And I think the eyewitness testimony in a court is counted as one of the best evidence. Neil deGrasse Tyson say it's one of the highest form of evidence in courts, and he hates it that it's one of the highest form of evidence in court. But eyewitness testimony is a lot used in court, and I have many eyewitness testimonies where they come in contact with God and it totally changes their whole life. Totally changes their whole life from darkness to light. And that's just some of the massive amounts of evidence I have for the Christian God. You would say that's not good evidence at all.
No,
right?
because I think that only tells us about how confident they are and how and what they believe, and that doesn't tell us anything about the rationality of their belief.
So,
because we're concerned with
say many people, say everyone,
their belief.
So say multiple people testify that they came in contact with you, and they testify what they experienced, etc. They put their lives on the line for telling all the atheists they came in contact with monkeyboy. And you would say that's not good evidence at all for monkeyboy.
So repeat that.
So, like, many people have come in contact with you in your life, okay? And say they come to me and they testify that they met monkeyboy and what monkeyboy is like and stuff like that. Won't you say that's good evidence that you actually exist and what you're like, etc.?
I might, yeah.
Okay, so if I bring the same kind of evidence for God, then it's no longer good evidence.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that it would be anything similar, because in inferences about whether a person exists based on experience, where there's like a convergence in like people who share those experiences of a person existing, I would think that there might be some credible reason to think that. But when concerned with a disembodied spirit that has agency and causal powers, they're saying they're experiencing something like that. I think that the prior probability that type of thing exists, both the priors and the conditional probability, the strength updating, would be far significantly weaker. As well, it's not really clear even what it would mean to have an experience with that type of thing, or how you would make a good inference from that type of thing existing. Typically, the people there don't make good inferences from their experience, or they typically just question beg. Like, it's kind of something similar to saying that, oh, Superman saved me last week. Like, I fell off a building and Superman saved me. But they're not really telling you the inference that's going on to which they even get to God. They just kind of read into their experience.
Well, I can send you the video I made about it.
Yeah, but I think
then you can see more
tend to
closely
read into their experiences rather than infer things from their experience. Like, if I had an experience of falling off a building, and someone swooped me up in red and blue tights with like black curly hair, I might have an inference to Superman existing because the guy's heroic and shares powers similar to Superman, and maybe qualitative features or perceptual features. He shares like the same appearance, right? But that's typically what theists are not doing.
Would you realize that God exists if you realize that demons exist? Or I've seen some atheists say yes and some no.
Well, how's a demon cashed out here?
Like a disembodied spirit that wants you not to believe that there's a creator and is super evil. Like
Okay, so
you
morally,
can,
like an unethical spirit
like
who acts to move you away from believing in God.
like you get evil people, right? And if you're in a room with like a super evil person, you can kind of see what they do and kind of get a sense of how evil someone is. Now, the same with these things; they seem to have different ranks of evil, and different ranks as well. Like in our armies, we have different ranks. They seem to be different ranks as well. That's why Satanists want to try and figure out who's in the highest rank, so they can rather call that higher demon to help them than the lower demons. It has a bigger effect for them, they claim. That's why they try and figure out what's going on. It's called demonology, right?
Yeah, I think demons would be evidence in favor of thinking God exists, though. For Christianity in question, well, one is obviously like maybe I would think that demons are a good evidence, probably.
Okay, so
not good enough
I can
that
give you an example
rationalizes the belief,
pointing
though. I
towards
think it
the
makes
Christian
an
God.
impact to the degree you should believe in God.
Like I can show you example. Like in Islam, there's an angel that comes in contact with Muhammad in a cave. Okay, and this angel seems to have a lot of demonic characteristics. Like it seems to like grab him around the neck or something because his neck starts twitching, and it tells him to read 3 times, and he's in total fear. Usually, angels in the Bible, they say don't fear. This thing just causes massive amounts of fear and doesn't say don't fear or anything, and just seems to choke the life out of him 3 times. To the Christian God, that this thing has characteristic of demons where they do stuff in 3 because it seems like they hate the triune God. That's example
Well, I don't
of many,
think
one
the
of
Trinity
many,
is
pointing
possible.
back to the.
So if you're a
You
Trinitarian,
don't think the Trinity is possible? Also,
yeah. So I don't know if you ever heard about the LPT, the logical problem of the Trinity, but the issue just stands with the Trinity is that the Trinity commits you to saying that there's one God but 3 distinct persons in the hypostasis. So the 3 persons are distinct numerically and share the same essence. But the issue just is by counting by absolute identity, or counting in classical logic traditionally, if you have X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z are numerically distinct and of each their G, so of each person their God, then what happens is you just count by the number of G's there are, such that you count 3 G's. A basic example is if there's 3 persons and they're each distinct, but they're all a king, then you count 3 kings, right? So the consequence of endorsing the Trinity is that there's 3 gods.
Yeah, but like I understand that on say, I see it more as like dimensions. Like a closer analogy to it is dimensions. Like if you in a 2-dimensional plane, you can take a few lines or and then produce like a square. And if you have multiple squares, you can like 6 squares can make a cube. So it's 6 squares but 1 cube, 1 object. So you don't leave behind the previous stuff in previous
But that's
dimensions.
partialism.
No, I'm just saying that you can get some kind of idea. If there's a being that's greater than us, we would expect him to be in like a higher dimension almost, where you see a square coming in new forms that you that aren't living in that higher dimension can't possibly even imagine. You understand? If you
Well, I've
never
understood
lived in a 3
analogies
dimension.
like that, but if you're saying that the Trinity is something like the 3 persons are each the dimension that unified compose the cube, the dimensions of the cube, and that's just saying that you're a partialist, which is
No.
technically
I'm
theologically
just.
heretical.
It's not no analogy is perfect with it. I'm just trying to give you like an idea that it's not so crazy. If you go up in dimensions, you don't leave behind the previous things that you found in the previous dimension. You get it in new forms that you can't imagine. Like you, I would say you are 3 in 1 as well. You have a body, soul, and spirit, and you're 3 in 1. Now, God, how much more
But
higher
that's
and
like
more complex?
mereology talk. Like we're composed of, there's 3 parts that compose the person, that the person's composed of: this body, the spirit, and the mind, right? But that just sounds like each, if they're parts that compose the person, then that's just partialism, that they're parts that unified complete the the person, but the Trinity is denying that the three persons of the Trinity unified complete the Trinity. They're saying that the persons are not a third of God when unified complete God,
Mm.
that each person are God and they share the same essence,
Mm.
but there's only one God in counting.
There's only one God. The
Yeah,
Bible
but
also
your
calls
analogy is only
a
help to
man
serve
and a woman
partialism.
becoming one flesh. So do you also not understand that that's possible? Like
But I'm saying
someone
your
calling,
examples only help to serve partialism.
how so?
Yeah, because the mind, body, and spirit composing the person, it's in the name, right? Or it's in the phrase compose. When you talk compositionally, you're saying that each of those three things are a part of the complete person, where when all unified completes the person. But the
Yeah, but I think you can be a soul without a body. So you're both a soul and a body. Your body has different parts, and it still makes one body.
but when you talk
So
when you're
to
talking
say,
about personal identity, you're talking about the three in total, right? Like typically you might say that's John's body, right, and not John. If John is when John is animated, you're referring to the three things: the body, the mind, and the spirit.
yeah, but I think your soul can be put into another body, or your soul, like your body. Say we copied your body, we
Do you think
used
the
all
person's
the
only
exact
defined
DNA
by the
code.
soul?
I think our body is like a robotic body that has nanomolecular machines at the base, and I think it follows our commands. Like if you tell your hand to move, it follows your commands. It's very robotic.
Yeah, but not to get into the weeds. How does
And I
this
think
relate back to the Trinity?
so. What I'm saying is, like your body even consists of many parts, but it's one body, and your soul inhabits your body. So say we copied your whole body, okay, and would you say you're looking at your body, and you are in this one body looking at the copy of you? Are you then that person as well, or how would you see this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to have a whole debate on personal identity. I'm just trying to understand how these.
Because you said the Trinity is doesn't make logical sense or something.
Yeah, it's logically
So I'm
impossible
trying to
because
show
by
that
counting you get three gods.
I don't think you get three gods. Not if
Yeah,
they're.
but each person of the Trinity God by predication.
I'm not sure,
So then when you say you
but they're called one. They're one in a certain sense. They are one being.
well, I count three gods because if they're God by predication, and they're distinct numerically, then you count by the number of things that instantiate the predicate, such that there's three gods. Because there's three distinct objects that are each satisfy being God.
So, do you think a lot of people that study theology, that study God at university, would they agree with you that it's three gods that have PhDs in
Most of them,
theology, not demonology?
I think most theologians are unaware that this is a consequence. Of course, they wouldn't accept it, but I do think many philosophers today, they try and avoid the issue, especially the scholastics. They try, well, more broadly than the scholastics, but many of those of Catholic philosophy, they want to endorse RI theory, relative identity theory, and they use that to kind of diffuse the issue by saying that, well, the persons are, they either want to entirely avoid numerical talk or say the persons are not numerically identical, but what they want to say is that the persons are identical relative to the sortal essence, right? The sortal predicate of the divine essence. But I think that RI theory, which is a complicated theory of identity and counting the Trinity, I think that those theories fail. And then there's other more nonsense views like counting by division, which people actually think is somehow anything but partialism. But from what I've heard, the only thing they have on offer is RI, and I think RI is a failure.
So you think the simple God of Allah, like of the Muslims, is more like it makes more, because I think the triune God makes much more sense, because like it can explain then why God doesn't need us to experience love. It has always experienced love. It can invite us into a loving relationship that has always existed. Allah can't do that because it's just one person. It's not three persons in one being. Like God can invite us into a loving relationship. Well, Allah can't do that. Like that has always existed because He is just one being. That's also how I think Allah is a less greater God than the God of the Bible. It's like it's like Satan says in the Bible that he's going to make himself like the Most High, and it seems like Allah is that. It's tricking people into thinking He's the Most High.
I think
But
you could
so
just
you
avoid
won't
the
see.
issue altogether by denying the Trinity. I think like Unitarianism makes
So
more
you
sense.
think what?
I'm saying I
You
think you
think
can avoid the
Allah
issue
makes more
altogether.
sense than the Trinity?
No, I'm
Huh?
saying Unitarianism. So like it's typically the thing in competition with Trinitarianism.
Yeah.
Instead of saying that there's three.
You say
persons.
Unitarian makes more sense.
Yeah, like.
Mhm. Which would you say is a greater God if it exists, a triune God or a Unitarian God? If it could possibly exist. Why?
Yeah, because it would avoid the LPT and the problems I have with it. Like, for example, like.
So you don't think a God that's triune can do more
modalism,
things?
Well, I don't think that being triune somehow makes you in any way more capable, right? I think like Unitarian model is like modalism. Yeah, because with modalism you can account for the things the persons do by saying that the persons take different functional roles in which there's a meaningful distinction in sense, but they refer to the same person. That there's only one person with the divine essence. So you're referring to different modals.
So you would more be on the side of Muslims when they say that
Unitarianism
is
a Christian view.
Yeah, but I'm saying, would you be more on the side of Muslims when they say that the Christian God is just three gods? It's not one God. You say you would be on their side, or you would be more with the Unitarians would make more sense to you. You say Trinitarian doctrine doesn't make.
Well, I think
you struggle to understand it.
Yeah, I think the Muslims are making far more sense altogether and avoiding both Unitarian and Trinitarianism. Contrastively, of course, I think that Unitarianism is preferable, but the whole the whole modal and role talk of the one person of the divine essence, I think it's better just to take a more simplistic route with the Islamic philosophy there.
Who do you think has better evidence, the Christians or the Muslims? If you had to look at all the evidence.
Oh, I can't speak. I've never looked into Islam to really have any say in the fight, but because I've been a Christian my whole life, when I was a theist, and I never even really considered Islam. But I do have an Islamic philosopher friend who is an atheist. He studied Islamic philosophy, as well as he's been debating Christian.
Just under 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, his name is Venus. I remember him saying that I believe he said that he would actually prefer being a Muslim than Christian, considering the net whole of issues on both halves. So I guess I have credence in being Islamic, but I'm still kind of reserved because I don't really know anything about it, because I might come to my own judgment, considering if I was informed enough.
I see there's a super chat here. Nobody on fire says 3 is larger than 1. So, but it doesn't understand that it's not 3. It's like 3 chapters equals 1 book. You understand? It's not 3 chapters equals 1 chapter. It's 3 persons equals 1 being. I'm just saying, like, the equation, if you put an equation there, it's 3 persons equals 1 being, like saying, to give you an idea, and no analogy is perfect, 3 chapters can equal 1 book, or 3 pages can equal 1 chapter.
Kieran Dave,
if you understand.
Send me, don't know me too. I have a link tree in my blog post.
Kieran Dave, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, I'm a big fan of monkeyboy, and I love to see him in the bloodbath.
I do get a ticket.
Yeah, I like.
Unironically,
I like talking to monkeyboy. He seems like a nice guy, and I love that he knows that there is evidence for God, and he doesn't constantly interrupt me or anything like that, which is awesome. Like, I love speaking to you. It's just super late here. It's already 3 a.m. here, so my brain is crashing a little bit. But we can try and go on some more. What else do you want to delve into? What interests you in this topic?
Maybe we can talk about the problem of evil and whether or not you're sensitive to that argument. Because you take the view.
Yeah, I think evil points to God, actually.
Yeah,
like real evil, like demons, is actually evidence for God, in my opinion. Like, there wouldn't be no objectively evil if there was no Christian God or God. Like the magnetic field is an objective reference point, and if we didn't have that, then everyone's like compass of north and south would be just as valid, because there's no objective reference point. The same with morality. I can't tell Muslims that they're wrong for cutting off Christians' heads if there was no creator. Then they can do what they want. So I think it's actually evidence for God, real evil. But yeah, you can, monkeyboy, you can go through the argument.
Yeah, do you think
argument?
You think evils and goods are opposed, right?
Like, something can be both evil and good at the same time.
Like, you think things can be both good and evil? What would that mean?
Yeah, like for example,
because to say something's good means you should do it, and what it means for something to be bad is that you shouldn't.
Like, yeah. Okay, but what I mean is like it's like, say we have to operate the child. It looks like, if you look closely, you see, oh, the child is being destroyed, but if you zoom out, it's actually being saved. So if you zoom in, sometimes something looks super bad, like the crucifixion of Christ, but if you zoom out, it has actually a massive good effect, but it's still bad, if you understand what I mean. Like, I don't think demons are good. I don't think demons do something good, but they have free will,
Do
which
you
is
think
a
when
good
something's
quality.
bad, that when you
What?
act to prevent it, that's a good?
Excuse me?
Yeah, when you say someone's doing something good, you're saying that they're in turn stopping something bad from coming about.
All right,
You
that's
can say it
time.
like
Go
that
ahead
as
and
well.
respond to this, and then we'll move into the conclusions.
I haven't been
Okay.
lagging, by the way, have I?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
Also, I'm gonna send you. Just check DMs. You can probably send in the comments. I really need money. I'm sorry.
What's your job, Monkey
Who
Boy, if I
starts?
may ask?
Well,
Is this your job on the internet?
not really. I only have a job between semester breaks because I do full-time college. So I work for like
What are you
2
studying?
months. I'm studying economics and ethics.
Okay, ethics. It has to do with our topic. So the problem of evil, you say, well, do you think there's objective ethics, or there's objective morality, or do you think everything's just subjective?
Well, I'm an anti-realist, but the meta-ethics for the context of the problem of evil actually doesn't matter, because all that matters to the argument is not really what's meant by good and evils, but just the fact that evils and goods are opposed, such that when I act to do a good, I act also to prevent an evil. And if that's the case, and God's utmost desire is to do the good, and he's omnibenevolent, which means he realizes desires wheresoever there's no stronger competing desires, then he'll always realize his desire, and his utmost desire would then be that to prevent evil, such that evils can exist wherever God exists.
But you realize that evil doesn't really, like, it's not something created. It's like a deprivation. It's like only light or energy is created. The lack of it is like cold, but cold isn't created. So the same with evil. Evil is not something God created. It's the deprivation of good, or like with energy, cold is not something created. It's only energy exists.
That metaethical theory is consistent with the LPOE and what I'm saying. Because even if you have a deprivation account, as long as God is opposed to evil, it's given he's all good. And that would mean that his utmost desire is to act to realize the prevention of evils, and he can't fail with respect to his desire, which would entail that he exists in a world with no evils. And of course, it's an essential commitment of the theology that evils exist, such that God can't exist.
Okay, so you think it's impossible for evil to exist if a good God exists?
Yeah, if good and evil are oppositional, and God is perfectly rational, where desires rationalize actions, and he's omnipotent in the sense that insofar as he can do anything logically possible, then I don't think a God like that could exist, so long as evils exist.
So you don't think they could be, if you zoom out, some kind of good from evil? Like, if you give a being like us free will, that is some kind of good, even though the being can use that for some kind of bad, that can be healed by God.
Yeah, if you're talking about this instrumental evil talk, where evils yield purpose for greater goods, then all you're talking about is superficial evils, because all you're saying is that divorced from the relevant context, they're evils, but considered the point of the evil, they actually serve a moral and ethical purpose, such that you're actually moved to do it, right? So they're actually, they're not gratuitous evils, they're actually, instrumental evils, and those are actually just a type of good. But I don't think you can even have instrumental evils if God existed in the type of God described, because to say that there's instrumental evils just means that God couldn't reach the desire without the evil, but that's not possible given God's omnipotent, right? You might, like, an example is like...
No, God can't do illogical stuff, right? You can, like, being able to do everything doesn't mean like you can do illogical stuff. Like,
No, not
right? That's not the
anything
possibility.
logically possible. Yeah, I'm not saying you could do illogical stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that you could just do anything that's logically possible. And I'm saying that if that's the type of God we're talking about, then even instrumental evils are impossible, because instrumental evils are to say that they serve a use if the aim intended to reach is that this is necessary for. But that's not the case for an omnipotent being. Right? And an example would be like, You might say that when I give a child a vaccine that saves his life or something, that, you know, an instrumental evil would be the pain it endorses to the child. You can imagine the pain's like excruciating, but that's like done at the cost of saving the child's life. So it's like an instrumental evil, and it's kind of overcompensated by the greater good it brings into fruition. But the issue just there is if there's a being who has, if the doctor had two needles, he had one that doesn't give pain and one that does give pain, and they have the same aim and the same efficacy, meaning they're no different in power, right? They're like the same needle, but one just gives pain. They're reaching the same outcome. The unnecessary pain would be something worse to bring about, right? So if someone did that, then they couldn't be all good. The doctor couldn't be all good because it would have been a better thing, right? And the only reason he's justified in using the needle with the pain is if there weren't one that doesn't endorse pain. But the point is that God is always like the doctor with an available needle that doesn't give pain.
Not if something is illogical.
Yeah, we're not talking about anything illogical. So long as it's logically
Yeah, I'm just saying that
the end.
there might be some kind of illogical thing that you can't achieve if you don't have this pain.
You're saying that it is necessary. But
yeah, I think pain is even necessary for our existence. In heaven, we don't need pain because we're going to be indestructible. But at the moment, anything
I'm
that's
talking about logical necessities, so synthetic facts couldn't be logically necessary.
And you don't see that real evil could point to a creator. Like if there's actually some, like demons, I think they are super evil.
All right, we are out of time, so I guess go ahead and respond to this last point, and then let's not do a chain of points after this, and we'll move into the closing statements.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of relative to the God in question. I think that with Christian theism, that evil is just kind of just kills it from the onset.
Gotcha. And so we've got 8-minute closing statements. Maarten, you are the affirmative, so you'll be going first on the closing statement. Let me know when you're ready, and go ahead and make your closing statement. And I'll start your closing statement, and I'll start your timer.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, you got 8 minutes.
Okay, Monkey Boy, it was fun chatting with you. It was interesting. I would love to show you more evidence for the Christian God and show you the testimonies I talked about, which provide further evidence. You have to see it with your own eyes to actually, make more sense of it. And it's like seeing the astronauts that came from space, and they actually, with their own eyes, tell you what they saw and experienced and what it was like in space. I was very glad that he knows that there's evidence for a creator. It already puts him in a. I have respect for him for that. He was very cordial. He was very nice to chat with, and we went through a few things. I think that, like he said, that like these things, he at one point said that when we were talking about the scientists looking into space and finding these things would be good evidence for intelligence elsewhere, but he doesn't seem to see the same thing being true for when scientists find the same kind of thing in us, which we can flesh out sometime, or I can provide him more evidence that it is so, to make that evidence stronger for him. Good evidence, it's quite subjective. Okay, so flat earther would never say that we have good evidence for round earth, obviously, or they would try and fight against that. So I think we should just always be aware of our biases against any evidence that we don't or might not like. Same for Christians, anyone. And yeah, it was nice chatting with him. I still think the best evidence for God is cumulative evidence. I don't think his example of good evidence for God that he could possibly think up is actually a good example of good evidence for God. Well, I don't see it. Perhaps you guys see it as good evidence, but I personally don't see that as good evidence. But it's perhaps just for me. But I think some people, I don't think most atheists would think that's good evidence for God that he came up with, which is unfortunate because I was hoping for some kind of better evidence that he can possibly think of. I think there is lots of good evidence for the Christian God, like super lots. Like I have seen so much evidence for the Christian God. Like I can provide some more. Like Patrick David, I think, is his name, and he did a test. He was he was an atheist, and he wanted to say, he said to God, like, I don't believe you exist, God, but if you exist, let my mother call me right now. And he was crying late at night, like totally down. And 30 seconds later, his mother calls, and he was super scared. Like, I don't know why, because he probably saw this, like, this is crazy evidence for creator. And his mother called and he answered the phone, and he's like, "Why do you call me?" And his mother is like, "God told me that you are in pain. I had to call you." And there's another one of those examples where a guy was preaching the gospel to people, and he was asking, "What does the Christian God have to do to show you that he loves and cares about you?" And the one guy said, like, "My mother needs to call me right now and apologize. If God can do that, I'll believe him. If the Christian God can do that, I believe in him." And they were praying for that, and just after the prayer, the guy got a call from his mother, and she apologized and said she became a Christian like a few days before, and that's why she's calling him. So stuff like that, you can call it just coincidence, but you can always make excuses for any kind of evidence, right? So in a court case, the opposing side is not going to accept any evidence that they provide. They're going to always try and run to any kind of counter argument that explains that same evidence. Like, say someone finds DNA at the crime scene, they can say, "Oh, perhaps someone planted the DNA there." So then you have to fight against those arguments as well. But I'm saying, like, there's so many pieces of evidence that points to the Christian God existing that it I think you can say beyond a reasonable doubt that the Christian God exists if you look at all the pieces of evidence. But if you just look at a few, it's easy to make excuses for the few and say, okay, we can probably explain away this evidence, DNA evidence, in any kind of evidence. So we should always look at it as a cumulative case, and realize that in court, cumulative evidence is what actually proves that the guy is guilty. And just because you have excuse for one piece of evidence doesn't make it evidence anymore. Just because there's DNA, or say they found the fingerprints on the gun that was made to kill the guy. Just because you can make up an excuse for that evidence doesn't make it no longer evidence. It will still be evidence. Just like the flat earthers can make excuses for each piece of evidence that the earth is round, it doesn't mean it's no longer evidence that the earth is round. You can always think of some kind of counter for any evidence. Like, I would love to see some kind of evidence that someone can't make a counter for. So we should also always remember that as well. Like, don't throw all this evidence away that I provided just because you can think of some kind of counter to the evidence. Like, oh, it might be, some kind of other thing. It's still evidence. Put it with the cumulative case, okay? And then, like, build the cumulative case. Look more and remove your biases. Try and be objective as possible. Try and not be blinded by biases, massive biases. I think that causes a lot of people to stay deceived.
1 minute remaining.
Yeah, I see. I'm watching the time here. But so the people are always going to explain away evidence. Make sure, like, you take care to not be blinded by biases against evidence, and make sure you take in consideration the consequences of you being wrong. Like, the consequences of flat earthers being wrong, there's not massive consequences. That's why I don't talk to flat earthers, because I don't think they need me, because there's no massive consequences. But I would talk to atheists because there is massive consequences if they're wrong. And we need to help each other, because there's probably some places where I make a mistake. So yeah, but it was fun chatting with you guys. That's done.
Perfect.
Before the time.
And I guess I just DM'd you this, but I want to make sure that you're over 18 before I make this joke. Monkey Boy, you are over 18, right?
No, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure. Yeah, that was a yes, right?
Yeah. I'm pushing.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure before I made an inappropriate joke. So I am putting up a poll for tonight's master debater. So with that in mind, so we're gonna do Monkey Boy's closing statements, and while he's doing that, I'll put up the poll for the master debater. So if y'all are in the chat and you think you know who, or you have an idea of who you think won, make sure to hit who you think tonight's master debater was. Monkey Boy, let me know when you're ready, and I'll go ahead and put up the timer.
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, you've got 8 minutes starting now.
Great. Yeah, so one side comment is with that master debater joke is now I actually realized I haven't watched South Park in ages, so I might binge that for a bit now. But in any case, yeah, I'm going to keep mine short. I don't have much to say. I think my interlocutor was very pleasant, demure, cordial. I think the debate was not as linear as I kind of wished it were, but it was a really light debate. Wasn't incredibly aggressive where I was blowing out fuses and popping veins in my head. So I think that, it's the fun, enjoyable type of debate that is productive and whatnot. I don't have much to comment on the arguments. I think the IT stuff didn't really go much of anywhere. I didn't get much of accounting method of identity from him when talking about OPT. I think that he kept kind of giving examples that were akin to like partialism, and we didn't really get into the problem of evil much. So we mainly talked, for the most part, about ID, intelligent design. And yeah, I don't really see why I would think that was a good reason. And we also talked in between that and LBT about whether demons existing would offer good evidence. But we never really got as deep as I desired for any one of those topics, because we kind of been too much distributing time amongst different points, because he said he had a collection of points. So we kind of, instead of, diving deep into each given point, or as deep as we could for each point, we kind of seemed to distribute his time as best as he could have to each point, which is not bad, but I'd rather have just took it kind of completely fleshing out point by point. So maybe we can have another one of these, or maybe I can talk to him privately on Discord some other time or whatever, so we can maybe talk more about this, put certain points to rest, or, just dive deeper as desired. I think this was hopefully enjoyable for both the part of the audience and me. I enjoyed it, and I hope the audience enjoyed this as well. If you don't know, I'm a small-time philosophy YouTuber. I have a YouTube channel. I'm presuming Taco had already kind of posted it, so you should subscribe to my YouTube. I kind of post regularly. By regularly, I mean like once every 4 days I post on YouTube. So if you liked how I performed in this debate, and you'd like to see people as competent, because my YouTube is not just me, even though it's centered around me. It's me, my friends, some other philosophers and whatnot, philosophy debaters. So you should maybe check that out. Of course, subscribe to Taco. This was a good debate. He moderated well. Some funny super chats. Thanks for everyone who donated to, of course, Taco. I hope that Taco does well and continues to get an entourage of donos. And thanks for that one person who sent me the 20 from the dono as well. And I think someone also, I think it was Kieran, he actually subscribed to my Patreon, so thank you as well for that. Thank you for everyone being here, everyone supporting, sending money, whatever. It's pretty good, and that's all I have to say, yeah.
All right. Thank you for the conclusions, y'all. We do have 40 votes on there. So I think and the lead is significant enough to where I'm confident calling that. It's not like it's 50-50. So tonight's master debater is monkeyboy. So congratulations on your master debater title, monkeyboy. I hope you wear it around your waist like a WWE
Congrats.
championship belt. You won the debate with 77%. So you are the master debater. And as tonight's as with every mega bloodbath that we do, the master debater gets a
I have a quick
Bible
question about
verse.
that.
Oh, what's up?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Is the master debating belt like big enough that it doesn't hold up my pants so I can master debate well, or is it like covering it up?
Definitely covering it up.
Oh, damn.
This is master debater, monkey boy. Come on. Anyways, with that being said, you do get a Bible verse read in the channel's favorite translation. What is your favorite Bible verse?
Ooh, me?
No, monkey boy.
Oh.
Let me think. I don't even know. Isn't there one with like a bear?
Oh, 2 Kings 2:23 and 24, right?
Maybe.
Oh, the Elisha going up from Bethel, getting, hey, you bald head, that one?
Maybe. I don't even know what's my favorite verse. I don't know.
Is it the bears that maul the children?
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's pretty fun.
All right. So this is the young guys make fun of Elisha. This is actually my favorite Bible verse. From Dea, Elisha go up Betheltown. What? Yeah. When he stay walk, some young guys come out of Dea town and make fun of him. They tell, no, come over here, you bolo head. He turn around and look at them, and he tell the one in charge, put kahuna on top of them, because he the one in charge guy. Then 2 bears come out from the forest and attack the young guys and hurt 42 of them. Then Elisha go from the Mount Carmel side, and from Obadiah, he go back Samaria town. So that's a beautiful verse. And we normally do an open panel after this. So we have a few people in the back waiting. Y'all are welcome to hang out for a little bit or head out if you need to, or whatever you want to do. I do have monkeyboy and Maarten's YouTubes linked in the description. So if you enjoyed anything they said, you should definitely subscribe to them. They're both, monkeyboy has very fun videos and educational videos. Maarten, it has some fun videos and actually very, very terrifying. Not in the sense that Maarten would think. But yeah. So what's up, guys? What's up, Howdy, Donnie, and Kurt, and Skeptic Philosophy?